Why don't I see?
Be coming up in just a minute.
Just in the nick of time. Okay. Hi, Tootie. We are glad you're here and glad everybody is here. Trying to make sure. All right, we're all here. Excellent. We have quorum. Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and thank you all for being here. To begin our meeting, I would like to note that the month of May is Jewish American Heritage Month, which recognizes and celebrates American Jews' achievements and contributions. But sadly, as I thought about this, I recalled what we've heard recently from Commissioner Gillies, that rather than celebrating the Jewish community, we've seen a disturbing array of anti-Semitic incidents and hate-motivated violence intended to intimidate members of the Jewish community and prevent them from living openly and freely as Jews. And my hope as we celebrate this month is that by fighting against hate and promoting acceptance, we can curb this awful trend. Now I'm going to ask my colleagues on the commission to please keep your video on throughout the meeting to help remain as accessible as possible to our audience. And I ask the same of the participating commission staff and presenters. And it looks like we all have our names, first and last names listed as well, which is great. All commissioners should have a copy of our agenda, meeting minutes, and other materials which were attached to the calendar appointment for tonight's meeting. So if you are looking for them, that is where they are. Now I'll go ahead and call the roll. Olympia Beltran, Ricky Brown, Dolores Canizales. I see you, but don't hear you. She's here.
I sit here. Can you hear me?
Now I hear you, yes.
Okay.
Faye Detsky-Weil.
I'm here.
Godwin Higa.
Here.
Kathy Molig.
Here.
April Purcell.
Here.
Jeff Razi Jafari.
Here.
Kristen Rizzo.
Here.
Tootie Thomas.
Here.
Liliana Zaragoza. Okay. And I did want to note that while I believe there were 4 commissioners not here, 2 of them, Commissioners Murray Ramirez and Commissioner Gillies, did notify us that they would be unable to join tonight and have been excused.
Commissioner Hazan, I don't know that you called me.
Oh no, you're right. Brianne Mode, thank you.
Shayna,
Yes.
I read an email from Commissioner Beltran saying that she wasn't feeling well, wasn't going to be able to be here.
Oh, good. I didn't see that. Thank you. So we haven't heard from Liliana Zaragoza. Hopefully she is well. Just like last month, we are looking for a commissioner to serve as secretary to take notes during tonight's meeting. And I want to thank Commissioner Purcell, who served in this role at our last meeting and produced beautiful minutes, I might add. Given our very limited staffing, having someone else serve in this role tonight would be really appreciated. Is there anybody willing to do this?
I will do it.
Thank you very much.
You can just assume I'll do it till you get a secretary. How's that?
We love that. That's fantastic.
Thank you
Okay.
immensely, Commissioner Purcell.
Yes, gold stars all around. Before we move on with our meeting, I would like to recognize staff and guests present. Joining us tonight are Deputy City Attorney Bill Gersten and our Human Relations Commission staff liaison and the city's Immigrant Affairs Manager, Farhat Popal. Now I'd like to have Farhat run down some of the guidelines for tonight's meeting. Farhat?
Thank you so much, Chair Hazen. Good evening. In an effort to provide greater accessibility, members of the public may join the meeting as webinar attendees in order to provide virtual non-agenda and agenda comment in real time. Commissioners, city staff, and authorized presenters are attending the meeting as panelists, and the meeting will function for them identically to a typical Zoom meeting. Please note the buttons on the control bar at the bottom of the Zoom window. The camera icon is to activate your video. The microphone is to mute and unmute. And please remember to stay muted when you are not talking, and to unmute yourself when you speak. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You will also see the chat window button. Please keep your chat window open at all times, as you will be using the chat to signal when you'd like to speak. We do recognize that there's a hand raising function, but we request that you type speak in the chat window for the record, and the chair will acknowledge requests in order. When wanting to make a motion, second a motion, or participate in a discussion, please type speak in the chat box and Chair Hazen will call on you in the order entered. Please refrain from using the meeting chat for anything other than signaling that you'd like to speak in order to comply with the Brown Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will ask Farhat that if I'm missing anything in the chat, please let me know, because I'm trying to monitor multiple screens.
Will do. And I do want to thank Commissioner Thomas for letting me know via chat that you all couldn't hear me. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is non-agenda public comment. The public was invited to submit public comment on agenda and non-agenda items via a web form, as you heard. Are there any items, Farhat?
No additional non-agenda public comment. I did receive one this morning that I shared with you all that was not relevant to the HRC, so did just want to note that for you all.
Perfect. And just wanted to add to that, that because it was, as you heard, unrelated to the commission and beyond our purview, it will be referred elsewhere within the city, I believe. Okay, our next item is approval of the minutes from last month, our beautiful Commissioner Purcell generated minutes. May I please get a motion to approve?
So move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Detsky-Weil. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Rizzo. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. I did want to add that I've reviewed the action items from our last meeting, most of which will be addressed later on tonight. And of the action items we will not receive reports on tonight, at least I don't believe we will. I wanted to share that Vice Chair Canizales and I have discussed launching a year-long campaign against hate, which was brought up and discussed last month, related to the presentation on by the API Coalition. And we are hoping that an associated committee will be launched. We know a few of you have asked to participate in that, and hopefully that'll start in the next few months. Now I will move on to our next item, which is our City Attorney's Office presentation. Deputy City Attorney Gersten will be offering guidance to us about a few things. So one, issuing written or verbal statements on behalf of the commission, which has come up multiple times, and I know we've all had questions. He'll also share rules about holding a commission retreat that is also a public meeting, and will provide a training for us on how to handle discrimination complaints, which is something we're called on to do in the municipal code. And I did want to just make sure everybody knows that the section of the municipal code pertaining to this is included in your meeting packet. So if you haven't yet seen it, it is in the packet, the last item behind the minutes. Deputy City Attorney Gersten.
Good morning, good morning. Why is my brain fried? Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good to see everybody. My name is Bill Gersten. I've been with the city, just a brief introduction, been with the city in my position since 2005. Sounds a little ancient, I know. But the time has quickly elapsed due to the fun and games of being a city employee. It's always interesting, never boring. I advised the HRC many years ago, for a period of time, and then it basically transferred within my office. So I'm lucky to have it land on my lap again, full circle. So Farhad had asked me to address a couple of concerns, give some guidance. I haven't prepared anything formal, so I'm presenting this in an informal fashion. Feel free, anybody, to raise their hand, jump in there with questions. As I say anything, I'd rather address it contemporaneously with my comments rather than revisit the end. Don't be polite with me. I'm not used to politeness. Feel free to just jump in, interrupt, and we'll get along well. With that said, so Farhad provided me 3 different topics that seemingly the commission wanted some guidance on. The first one was guidance on issuing written and oral statements. I'm not sure of the specific issue and how it arose, but I'm going to assume, and please correct me if my assumption is incorrect, that it has to do with a desire to issue either statements in writing or verbally on behalf of the commission as a whole. If is my assumption correct, that that's pretty much how the issue has arose?
Exactly. And really the desire is to be able to do it in a timely and responsive manner. So
Okay.
for issues related to our work, so for example, acts of extremism or violence that happen in the community, we want to be able to respond immediately. And so what we had tried to do, but I believe is not something we can do, is create a template around statements condemning extremism that could be tailored to address specific incidents and sent, which I would do and then send.
With that said, so I'm going to address the law first, and then we can deal with the practicalities or perhaps how you can facilitate to be in a timely fashion. So an individual member of the commission cannot speak on behalf of the entire commission unless the HRC has taken a vote in a public meeting to support the position and delegate the authority to that person to relay the position of the HRC. The HRC acts as a body through a majority vote of its members, not by acts of individuals. In addition, the position taken and sought to be articulated by the commission has to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the HRC. The HRC duties and functions are laid out in the San Diego Municipal Code, so its authority does not extend beyond those provisions. This, of course, has no impact or bearing on a commissioner exercising his or her individual free speech rights on any public issue in one's individual capacity. In addition, commissioners can even identify themselves, their resume, the fact they're on the HRC in articulating their First Amendment free speech rights. They simply cannot present their positions as those of the HRC.
Bill,
In the absence of a vote, a majority vote in the commission meeting. And they should always ensure when they're speaking in an individual capacity, if they're mentioning their position on the HRC, that they're speaking in that individual capacity.
So I want to just make sure everybody's clear about what that means, which is that you can identify yourself as a commissioner when issuing a public statement or speaking to the media, so long as you don't represent your views as a commissioner as the views of the commission as a whole. Is that right?
Correct. And I would just be overly cautious if one is going to provide that information that I'm a commissioner on the HRC. One should also be clear, I am not speaking on behalf of the HRC in that instance. I'm speaking in my individual capacity. But just like whatever jobs you have during the day, that's part of who you are. The mere fact you sit on the commission doesn't preclude you from telling the world that you do. So it's totally appropriate to say, I sit on the commission, but I'm speaking in my individual capacity, blah. But if you want to speak as a body, as a commission, you got to do it in a properly noticed meeting upon a majority vote, and it's got to be within the jurisdiction of the HRC. Now, with that said, understanding, as I understand, sometimes the meetings haven't been held all the time. There's some timing issues. Of course, you always have the power to call a special meeting on only 24 hours notice instead of 72.
Oh,
If there's exigent circumstances or you want to address this quicker in a quicker fashion than you would at a normally noticed meeting. So, I mean, that's one way to address the urgency.
So we could schedule a meeting with 24 hours notice and it could be a really quick meeting with one item, which would be to approve a statement on matter X, and hold that meeting over Zoom like we've done, and
Correct,
that would be fine.
correct. And, you know, assuming it can't trail to the next regularly scheduled.
Mhm.
But yes, you have that ability to always call a special meeting. And again, it's 24 hours public notice as opposed to 72. And then you can address it more contemporaneously if it can't wait. I believe you need monthly
Right.
if it can't wait till the following month. So you do have that option in your tool belt. So that's one way to address the concern about timing.
So Bill, you're saying that the chair can't speak for the commission as
Correct.
well?
Correct. In the absence of a majority vote of the commission. The commission is empowered and has the duties and functions as a body, not as an individual, whether a chair or a commission member.
Okay, so even though the commission may have passed something and the chair can't say, this is what the commission passed, or?
I'm sorry, Faye, can you repeat your question?
So if there's an issue that comes up and the HRC has already agreed on a position, the chair can't state that?
No, certainly anything the HRC has already voted on and approved by a majority vote can be restated. But it was my understanding the desire or the potential practice was pretty much a blank letter, fill in the blank, and can live in perpetuity. That causes me concern. I see a big distinction between that prospectively as opposed to prior votes of the commission. If all of you met last month and you condemned, I don't know, give me something to, you know, just whatever it may be, you condemned something last month, certainly the chair or any one of you could tell the world the commission, you know, voted last month to condemn X. What would be troubling to me would be a blank letter, fill in the blank by the chair, and not to pick on the chair, anybody individually to just simply fill in the blanks. Each new item that you want to condemn or make a statement about should be brought to the board for a discussion, properly noticed to the public so they have some input that may perhaps sway you one way or the other, and then an appropriate vote is taken. Now, certainly if a vote is taken and that needed to be communicated to something, the chair has the authority, or if you do someday get an executive director, it would be appropriate to say, you could send a letter and say, last month the HRC voted to condemn X. That's totally appropriate because the board's already voted on it. I mean, the commission. So I hope that answers your question, Faye.
Bill, can I just extending on Faye's question a little bit? What if it was a blanket template on, say, hate crime, that the HRC, that we vote and give Shana permission to say anything that we support anti-hate crime? Can we do that? And then for specific instances, she can speak on behalf of the board. She cannot. It has to be each individual instance.
Yeah, and certainly I'm not sanctioning hate crimes, but again,
Of course.
you know, a lot of the times that something occurs, and I'm not defending anything, but there's, you know, obviously due process rights. You know, if you read the media, it's allegation and conviction automatically. The whole point of it going to the board, to the commission, I keep saying board, is first of all, the commission acts as a body, not an individual. But number two, there has to be an opportunity for notice to the public, for their input, and for you all to have a discussion. I mean, it may be something comes where everybody wants to condemn it, but maybe it hasn't been proven yet, and maybe you want to defer that. I'm just offering hypotheticals where it would be, to me, extremely dangerous to just simply issue a carte blanche form and fill in the blank, because again, and not in any way denigrating.
No, I understand, and you clarified it well. I just wanted to zone into that much granularity, so thank you.
Okay, sure.
I do have one question. So as I'm thinking about this and trying to figure out how we can be as responsive as possible without having to, you know, call a special meeting, would it be possible to issue a statement that has the language, so in the letter that you've seen, or the standard template condemning extremism and acts of hate motivated violence, including that portion of text that the commission has approved, and to reflect, the City of San Diego Human Relations Commission says this, that they've approved, and then acting on my own behalf, referencing the specific incident at hand, but differentiating my view from the position of the commission, which has been approved about hate crimes and extremism generally. Might that be something that would be possible?
I'm sorry, just to make sure I understand. So you would be speaking in your individual capacity, but you would be referencing something the HRC previously heard and voted upon.
Yes.
Yeah, that's totally appropriate. You basically be citing to past precedent. It would be no different than me in a court saying 20 years ago there was this case Jones versus Smith.
Okay, the City
and
of
it
San
said
Diego
this.
Human Relations Commission condemns hate, everything that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so maybe that's a good
The
solution.
concern is just new situations that arise. We need the body of the commission to hear it and make a decision. But matters that the commission's already heard and voted upon, obviously that lives in perpetuity unless you were to vacate or reverse that. And you can always refer to that. And you can refer to that in your individual capacity, just like any person could. I mean, somebody could appear at non-agenda public non-agenda public comment before the council and just hold up, look, the HRC 6 months ago condemned blah, and I'm going to say this. So absolutely, you could do that.
Great, thank you.
But Bill, can I just clarify one more point though? Because to Shayna's point, we have a letter that has been approved in content. And so that with generalized content, right? We condemn hate crimes and violence and this and that. And this is what the HRC stands for. This is our mission, et cetera, approved. But then in the letter, can Shayna include something that says, in my individual capacity, I state the following as Shayna, chair of can that be included in a letter? Because that's one thing we were trying to do as the commission. And so I just want to nail that down again in writing. Is that possible?
Absolutely. If Shayna wanted to write a letter to whatever organization or whatever entity where something happened, she can certainly refer back to the HRC statement on an issue. What it shouldn't be on is, I don't know if you have HRC letterhead or you use the city's logo, none of that. It should be Shayna's name up on top. Dear whomever, my name is Shayna, da da da. My experiences are this. In addition, I sit on the HRC. Just so you know, the HRC in the past has said whatever it is the commission has approved. Absolutely okay. But my concern with what I had heard and what I saw was that Shayna would just simply take an HRC letter or an HRC body and just fill in the blank on behalf of the HRC. That's where I know it's kind of a fine line. I get it. I just want to make sure we're segregating speaking individually and speaking as a body. That's the important point for me. So, but yeah, whether you orally state the HRC's past positions, whether you put it in a letter, totally does not matter. Again, as long as it's in an individual capacity, or it's in a commission capacity if it went to the commission and they voted on it.
And I
Does that
see
make any
Commissioner
sense?
Thomas. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Gerson, for joining us and sharing this. I appreciate it. Is there a way within the structure of what we're doing to do an email vote? I know that on another board that I sit on, if there's a letter that needs to be approved, as long as it is 100% unanimous, everybody votes on it and votes in the affirmative, then we can issue that letter. But
if it was a public meeting open to the public, and the submission of the emails were confirmed for each commission member and read out by Farhad, yes, in theory, you can take a vote by email as opposed to Zoom or Teams or whatever it may be. But again, it's got to be noticed. The public has to have an opportunity to speak before you vote. But the mechanism for voting, whether you go like this or you say aye, or you submit an email, as long as that's shown to the public and Farhad has the ability to read it and record it and put it in the minutes, it's okay.
So
Does
that,
that
and
answer your
does
question?
that mean that we wouldn't actually have to have commissioners present at the meeting so long as they had cast their vote via email?
No, because it
Oh.
would have to be cast live during whatever mode of meeting you're having. Because the whole point is for the public to not only have the opportunity, but to know who's thinking what, who's saying what, and who's voting what. So in other words, Shana, if you just send an email a week before the meeting and say, I'm going to vote on number 3 in the affirmative, I, as a member of the public attending the meeting, wouldn't have the ability to hear Shana speak, why she's voting,
No, I understand.
perhaps influence you to vote the
Yeah,
other
I
way.
think what Commissioner Thomas was hoping for, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Commissioner Thomas, was that we could cast a vote via email, even if all commissioners were not doing so in the moment the meeting was.
No, then the answer would be no.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, any other questions on that item? Dolores, are you, oh, it's just your video, your chair is moving up and down. It's pretty cool. I'll let you do it. It's just the video feed. Moving on to the second on retreats. I have really not much to say about retreats, except that they're subject to the Brown Act. And whether you call them working groups, trainings, team building, if you're meeting with a majority of the commission in any location and you're discussing or dealing with any information within the purview of your jurisdiction, it needs to be open to the public. So, and I'm not going to give you legal mumbo jumbo, but there's an opinion by the California Attorney General back in 2003 that states that, and it makes sense because it doesn't matter the facility, the location. The bottom line, again, and I sound like a parrot or a broken record, is the public has to have right to access, to speak, and to hear what all of you say and potentially influence your decision or your vote. So I don't know if there were additional questions about holding a retreat other than Brown Act compliance. That's all I was under the impression there was.
Yeah, Bill, I'm wondering if, so I know it has to be, I understand it needs to be publicly noticed so that people can attend. If there are no action items at the retreat, does the public still need to be able to participate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The public access is not driven by whether it's an action versus informational. Bottom line is, as a commission of the city, you're subject to the Brown Act, so all meetings, obviously other than when there are the limited circumstances, you can hold a closed session, but all public meetings need on any business, whether it's informational or otherwise, need to be open to the public.
Thank you.
So essentially, we need to be as transparent as possible.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head, Faye. That is the whole purpose underpinning the Brown Act. Anything else on retreat? Any other questions anybody had? Okay. Seeing none, I'm moving on to how to handle the discrimination complaints. So this is a little more, it's easy, but yet it's difficult because it's specifically laid out in the Muni Code. And I don't want to just read to you. I'm going to kind of give you just a brief summary of it, of how that process works. And with that said, there are some holes or there are some portions of it that are, kind of gapped. And that's where bylaws and other rules that are promulgated by this commission can fill in those gaps. The key is, the starting point is the municipal code. We have to comply with that. Then, because it also gives the commission the power to pass bylaws and other rules and regulations necessary to the operation, if there are specific questions or specific gaps about how do we do this, they can be filled in that venue or forum. It just can't be inconsistent with the municipal code. So it's set forth specifically in section 26.0908. And this is just a brief summary, kind of like a chronology. How would it work? So that, it pertains to complaints of unfair or unlawful discrimination. And the executive director, in consultation with the chair, is supposed to conduct an investigation of any complaint received. If the investigation concludes that no discrimination took place, the complaint shall be dismissed, and that dismissal shall be filed with the commission. So the commission knows that Farhad, or whomever the executive director someday might be, looked into it, investigated, and found no cause or no support for the allegation of discrimination. If, to the contrary, if reasonable cause exists upon investigating to support the allegations, the chair, per procedures adopted by the commission, shall designate at least 2 individuals that may be 1 or more commissioners, and interestingly, or a non-commissioner that is trained in mediation or conciliation to conduct the mediation or conciliation in an effort to eliminate this discrimination. So interestingly, we were in our bylaws subcommittee, we were meeting on, we're discussing some of that. And what's interesting is the 2 people appointed do not have to be commissioners. What it could be, and more than 2. So it could be 4 people, it could be 3 commissioners and an expert in mediation, an outside expert in mediation or conciliation. So it's not an absolute requisite that commissioners have formal mediation conciliation training. Now, with that said, that assumes there's a budget for that. And that's a policy call, not a legal call. I don't get into that penumbra at all. So I just wanted to point out the process and who can be assigned to mediate or conciliate that finding, that good cause finding of discrimination. So assuming there was cause upon investigation to find that there was discrimination, recommendations can be made, but they're not binding on any matter on the parties. If accepted by the parties and the discrimination is eliminated, the matter is concluded. If it's not accepted or the discrimination cannot be eliminated by that mediation or conciliation, the commission may refer the matter to the appropriate authority that has jurisdiction over the issue. Now, with that said, I know there are questions about, well, timeframes and a lot of logistical specifics. That's where the commission is given the power to promulgate rules on how you're going to streamline that process. So for example, I'm just making something up. Within 10 days of receipt of a complaint, I'm injecting a 10-day requirement here. The executive director shall investigate the complaint. If you want a reporting to the commission on that investigation, that can be done too. The investigation must be completed within 2 weeks, and that person shall report to the commission the results of the investigation. All of those things can be facilitated or accomplished by the commission in their bylaws, or if they want specific rules on discrimination complaints. But the overarching guidance of how it's done is set forth in the meeting code. And I'm sure I'm not answering everybody's questions because there have been a lot in this regard. And I know complaints come in every day to Farhad. My suggestion, and before I even hear questions, is if the actual workings of this investigation are subject to question and people have a lot of questions, you probably should form a subcommittee to work on rules specific to handling discrimination complaints, the mediation conciliation process. That would be my suggestion. So if there are, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but if they're logistical, I'm not going to be able to answer them because I'm going to throw them back at you and say, you guys need to decide that. It's not a legal issue. I just need to know that when compliance with the meeting code, so that when a complaint comes in, it is investigated. If there is a cause finding, at least 2 people are assigned to attempt to mediate and conciliate it, blah, 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 following the process. That's my concern.
And I just wanted to add so that everybody knows the very next item we have will be sort of the start of a conversation about the process for responding to complaints. And of course, if there needs to be a committee or a task force formed to delve further into that, we will do that. I do see that we have questions from Commissioner Detsky-Weil, and then after her, Commissioner Higa.
So Bill, I know later we're going to talk a little about the bylaws, but it sounds like because it said procedures adopted by the commission, is this something we want in our bylaws about the procedures, the things you're talking about, or do we want something separate, not in the bylaws?
I think it's totally up to you, but if you just wanted a practical suggestion just from experience, I would make a separate set of rules just for this process. My experience is as the bylaws grow in length, people don't read them. And if you're not involved in investigations or mediation and conciliation, I'm not going to be looking for it. So 6 months down the road or a year down the road, the chair comes to me and says, you know, you want to be one of the people attempt mediation and conciliation. I'm going to say, well, what does that mean? Where do I go? If there was a separate compartmentalized set of rules for that process, I think it's a lot easier. And then it's not buried in the bylaws. That's just, again, that's not a requirement. That's just my suggestion. It's totally up to you. It can totally live in the bylaws if you wanted it to.
It's probably easier to make changes to it also if it's not in the bylaws, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to, yeah, correct.
Yeah, and I think my preference is to have a separate document that outlines the process, is really user-friendly, so that when these matters come up, whoever is assigned to deal with it can easily move through it without having to, you know, go through all the bylaws. And Commissioner Higa?
Yes, Bill, you know, about 3 years ago, we went through this process and we came to a conclusion that we're all not lawyers. So when we had cases assigned to us, it was very difficult for us to call the complainant and try to work through this. So then it was difficult for the commissioners to decide, okay, what is legal and what is not legal? What is the outcome? And what was very disturbing, I'm going to bring this up when I talk later, that the case that I had, it was sent to the city attorney's office. And then I just found out recently that nothing happened. So the complainant gave us all his information and we went through the whole process. It took months. And then we were told that it went to the city attorney's office at that time. And then I found out last week that they never got contacted. And so there was at a point when we're looking at discrimination issues, I need to know a protocol or whatever we're going to put in the bylaws that is very clear on what responsibility, accountability do we have? Because we don't want to, the big issue was, will we get into a situation where the commissioner is sued? And then we went to the equity, the EOC document, that we're not going to get sued because we're under the umbrella of the state. So it's kind of, it was pretty confusing for commissioners to hold a meeting and gather information and all that kind of stuff. It took a lot of work. But then the disturbing point was, I was told that the issue went to the city attorney's office and it never did. That was by the director that told me to stop this process. So anyway, I think if we're going to put together some sort of protocol or something in the bylaws, it has to be very clear. It has to make sure that the commissioners are not responsible with lawsuits that could happen. It could land, a lot of discrimination accusations about could lead to some sort of court case or lawsuit, things like that. So I just need to make sure that it's clear, and if I'm going to follow any protocol or procedures in the bylaws, that we're protected and we know what we're doing, because we're going to be face to face with those people and we don't want to look like idiots,
And I think, so we will talk about process next, but I am wondering, Bill, if you can talk about any responsibility or liability, anything that we should be concerned about, or at what point can our investigation end, and once it's handed off to another entity like the city attorney, are we no longer responsible? Can you speak to that?
Okay, I don't want to get too far afield because we didn't notice it, but just to Godwin's points or questions, and there was a lot in there. I mean, I could spend the next half an hour trying to address everything you said. But because the specific question that Shana just raised would emanate from your performance of the mediation, conciliation, addressing a discrimination complaint, which is noticed. I will offer a few comments. So first of all, let's just remember too, the commission doesn't really have enforcement, well, doesn't at all have enforcement authority. Remember, the whole investigation, mediation, and conciliation is all volitional. If the aggrieved or the company or the employer, whomever it may be, don't want to participate, they don't. So it's not like this commission can order anything to which somebody would want to sue or allege some sort of wrongdoing. The only thing that you all should be worried about, in my estimation, is that you fulfill what the Muni Code says you do, that you don't ignore complaints. You do go investigate because that's what it says you shall do. So I don't think there's any risk whatsoever of liability on any commission member's plate for anything they do. I mean, short of obviously meeting with them and then punching somebody out. I mean, something totally out of the course and scope. But if you're doing your job as assigned under the provisions of the Muni Code, you're not going to be subject to any liability. Even in the crazy instance, let's just say we have a crazy person out there. And let's say Farhad or whomever the executive director does the investigation, there was no cause, and the person goes nuts and sues everybody. You all are considered as members of the commission, employees of the city for purposes of covering you in the course and scope of your duties. So if you're doing your job and somebody were to sue you individually, there's a government code provision, and I won't get into knee deep into legalese, but we have a duty to indemnify you, just like the city has a duty to indemnify me if I am sued individually while I'm performing in the course and scope of my employment. So take that off the hook. You don't have liability. So, I mean, the rest of the stuff you mentioned, Godwin, I don't know the circumstances surrounding it, but what I can say is 9 out of 10 times, there's not going to be any criminal activity. My office is divided into a criminal division and a civil division. The criminal division has authority to prosecute misdemeanors. So discrimination is typically not criminal. Now, if that was combined with, let's just say, domestic violence or something that was a criminal matter, it could be referred to my criminal division. The civil division, we only take care of addressing discrimination, unlawful conduct in the workplace. The federal and state EEOC, the Department of Labor, all these other organizations, if you were to go and attempt to mediate or conciliate with an employer who refused to rectify the situation, the appropriate authority you would send that to would not be my office. We cannot civilly regulate, assuming there's no minimum wage violations, other ordinances of the city, but assuming it's straight up discrimination of some sort. The city is not the appropriate entity that has the power to rectify that unless it's within the city's workplace committed by city employees. So I don't want to address too much. I'm just trying to address some of the
No, I
concerns.
think that's really helpful. And I think as we talk through the process, getting really clear about when a referral is made to another agency or entity, making sure that it's the right one, right? So if it is not the city attorney's office and some other entity, that we make sure to do that.
And I would, I'm sorry, Shana.
I was going to say, any final thoughts from you, Bill, before we move on to our next?
Yeah, I would just say, rather than attempt to quantify or qualify or compartmentalize, what it says generally in the Muni Code is the language, because in each circumstance, there may be a different authority that you refer this to. It may even be the IRS if somehow during the investigation of discrimination, we find out they're not paying employment taxes or something like that. So I'd hate to wedge us into a corner to say, oh, in A, you go to this, and B, you go to this. Plus, the state and the federal EEOC, sometimes they share responsibility. So it's really a case-by-case basis. But if you go through the process and there's a finding of discrimination and it's not volitionally rectified, and you want to refer it to, we can address who the appropriate authority is to address that to.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us tonight and answering so many of our questions. We appreciate it. And I'm sure we will have more questions at future meetings for you to
My
come
pleasure.
answer.
My
Mr. Hazen,
pleasure.
I
And thank
just
you for
wanna-
all what you do. Any other questions? And I'm going to look to Farhad for permission to leave.
I'm just gonna
Um,
note that Commissioner Rizzo does have a question.
Okay,
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Rizzo.
Thank you. I know we're trying to excuse Bill, but Bill, I just have one question because I want to clarify this point.
sure.
When you were talking about investigations and then leading into mediations, I just want to be clear. It seems like you're saying the investigation should be conducted by like a staff person, like the executive director, and then the mediations should be conducted by the commissioners or someone outside the commission appointed, like someone who has specialized skill. So just want to be clear that the investigation doesn't seem to be conducted by the commissioners. Is that correct? That's what you're saying.
That's correct, but it does say after consultation with the chair. Now, after that consultation, the chair may suggest, oh, this is a really big case and it's a really big, so maybe the executive director needs help. There's no prohibition of a commissioner helping out if that was needed in a special circumstance, but it does vest that duty or work to the executive director to do an initial investigation, which kind of makes sense, assuming there's sufficient staffing, because attempting to root out cases where there is no discrimination. So why even bother the commission with it, other than to notify the commission that it was dismissed?
So I'm glad, Commissioner Rizzo, you brought that up because recognizing that we don't have sufficient staffing and there is no executive director, Bill, what is your recommendation? So if we receive a complaint today, the process should be what?
That's a hard question for me to answer, and I don't want to assume anything on the management policy side. So with it said that it should be the executive director, I'm going to punt a little to Farhad. I know she's got a full-time job in another department. I know she has the responsibility for this commission as well. I don't know if the powers of the executive director have been delegated to Farhad. I don't know if she is in terminology the interim executive director. Probably not, is my guess. And she's shaking her head, so I think that confirms it. I think in the meantime, I think if you don't have an executive director to perform that investigative function, I think you may have no choice, because again, it says after consultation with the chair. I think at this point, to fulfill your mission, until you have an executive director, I think it would be reasonable for you to simply assign a commissioner or a couple of commissioners to do that legwork.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I don't know what other choice you would have. And there's no prohibition of it. It's just allocating workloads on the assumption you have staff. So.
Right. Thank you.
And Farhad, I'm sorry if I didn't want to speak for you.
No,
It's kind of punting to you. I know you're in a precarious situation. I don't mean precarious. I mean.
Right. No, I definitely appreciate just your sensitivity and everyone's sensitivity to, I mean, the only way to say it is the staffing constraints that we have at the city. I am the city's staff liaison is kind of the term we're using. And as I've mentioned before, I mean, the folks at the city are aware that there is an executive director indicated for the HRC in the municipal code. And I continue to advocate for that just in my capacity as well, because of issues like this one, where there really needs to be additional staff to be able to do this work. And with that being said, I mean, there are complaints that come in, and it takes time and due diligence to review them, see if they're complete, see if they fit within the authority of the HRC, and that hasn't happened for the last year or so. So there have been complaints sitting in that inbox for a while. So we do need to figure this out, and I think that the next conversation around the process in the meantime is going to be really important to make sure that that authority that the HRC is vested with is carried out with due diligence to the extent, you know, that's possible given all of these constraints.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I would like to move on to our discussion that will be led by Vice Chair Canizales about process. I do see Commissioner Detsky-Wild that you have a question. Is it specifically for Bill?
Yeah, I want to know if we're going to hear a discrimination case. I know it's very touchy and it can be very confidential. Is that something the commission has to know ahead of time, has to approve ahead of time, or is it just something that's done with an executive director and the chair or whoever the chair is assigned to handle it? How, you know, does it have to come before the commission as a whole?
Which portion, the actual investigation?
The fact that there's a complaint, even
Well,
before an investigation. Do we have to approve, does the commission have to approve going forward with the investigation?
Oh, actually just doing, initiating the investigation? No. Because it says, it's charged to the executive director in consultation with the chair. It does not, to do the initial investigation does not require a commission vote. Going beyond that, there are, depending on what that investigation finds, there's processes and things that have to be brought to the full commission. But no, if a complaint comes in to investigate it, you don't have to go to the commission, say, we need a commission vote to investigate it.
And so then it would be, so the chair could, outside of an actual publicly noticed meeting, assign commissioners to work on this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's how the municipal code is written. Correct. It's not a decision by the commission as a whole. It's a decision by the executive director in consultation with the chair.
That's helpful because historically, these items were brought before the full commission, and commissioners were asked if they would like to volunteer to investigate. So it's helpful to have this.
And I think the flip side, I think what Faye might have been getting to as well, is when a mere allegation comes in that needs to be investigated, you don't want to explode that in a public meeting with 17 commission members and members of the public. There may be sensitivities involved. And I know if I was the aggrieved or an employer and I knew my information was going to be publicized in this big open meeting, I may not come forward or I may not want to mediate. So I think it's only getting to the commission when either a finding of no cause or cause is done after an initial investigation.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. I see Commissioner Rizzo you have your hand up. Can we, is it a question for Bill or can we get on to the process?
Well, I don't know if it's a question for Bill or the subsequent process. So because in the absence of the executive director on this issue of investigation, is someone going to put forth to us guidelines about the process for investigating, and is Bill that person or is someone else going to be that person?
Well, I would suggest if you're forming a subcommittee to write rules on the conducting of mediation conciliation, you can certainly put that in there. I think what makes it very hard right now is this is a temporary period of time where you don't have staff. It's an anomaly. And it may not be an anomaly if it continues in perpetuity, but it's not how it's supposed to be. So is it kind of like a temporary set of rules you're going to put in there because you don't have an executive director and how that's going to play out? I think it's really up to the discretion of the chair to decide, okay, there should be 2 people or 4 people or 6 people, and then ask those people if they can do it. But if you need rules on, because you don't have staff, then I would suggest set them up it's within the rubric of mediation, conciliation, discrimination complaints. So you can put it in there in the event there's no staff, blah, blah, blah. You can do it that way. Or just leave it to the discretion of the chair.
Okay.
You know, it's tough to answer because nobody envisioned this. So, you know, it's kind of strange.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you. And I know, Bill, that you are very responsive as we have questions. So if anything, you know, after we discuss the process comes up, I know we know where to find you. So we will reach out.
I can't
and
hide.
I'm sure this is a to be continued.
Okay. Well, stay well, everybody. It was nice meeting the ones of you I haven't met up till now, and look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Stay well. Bye.
And
Bye.
our next item is our process for responding to complaints. And before I turn it over to Vice Chair Canizales, I want to make sure I ask if there's any public comment for this item.
So, yes, so I just want to note to those members of the public in attendance, please click the button to raise your hand to indicate that you would like to comment. And seeing none, please move forward.
Thank you. Vice Chair Canizales?
Thank you. Been sitting here patiently because I think that, you know, as you all heard this conversation about these complaints, and as we've gone through the bylaws, what's very evident is that we don't have an executive director. We don't have the appropriate staff that we've had in the past. And since we have a couple of new commissioners, I just wanted to give you just a little bit of history with the commission before we move into the items, basically. I think it's important to paint a picture and a backdrop. Ironically, today on May 19th, I was sworn in as a commissioner in 2015. I was sworn in with the executive director, another commissioner, and the chair. I served as a commissioner for 4 years and left the commission and decided to come back. During those first years with Danelle Scarsborough, I mean, there was a lot of activity. We had the dinners, we had events. It was a commission that was very active. Unfortunately, things started to change. After Danelle, there was Joel Day, there was Time Curtis, and a year ago, Jonathan Gluss came and said, you know, we're trying to get back together. And so it's been a year. And we haven't had the proper staffing that we've had in the past. We've had Danelle, we had Joel Day, and then we had Time as acting director. I understand COVID happened, and now we have, and then we had Jonathan and Belle.
Makana.
Pardon me? Oh, right. And so, so you know, and we've been, you know, Shane and I joined the commission and wanted to work with all of you to kind of get us back to a point where, to a place where we know we could go. We believe in the work of the commission, but I think it's really important that we don't move forward and start working on a process and try to deal with some of these complaints without looking at the big picture and this overarching issue of adequate staff. You know, as Bill held up the, you know, municipal code, yes, we have a responsibility as commissioners, but we also have in the municipal code that we have an executive director or staff. And as I mentioned originally, we were going to ask for volunteers to form a subcommittee to start to look at these complaints, but I couldn't move forward with that without voicing my strong concern about not having an executive director or even an acting executive director in the position, because it's really unfair to those people who have been writing to us for the last year and us not even knowing about it until recently. And so anyway, with that, I would like to just have a discussion about our next steps as a commission to make sure our voices are heard, whether it's going to the leadership in the city or going to our individual council members to express our concern about not having adequate staff. And so with that, I'll open it up to any concerns, questions, or volunteers to start to look at some of these issues. The second part of what is on the agenda is to look at recurring issues and then come up with a plan to address recurring issues within the city, because that is really in our purview, not necessarily to look at every single individual complaint, but to look at trends and to analyze those trends, and whether it's hate crimes or discrimination, then to create an action plan related to those specific trends.
And it looks like Commissioner Detsky-Weil would like to speak.
I'd like to add to what Dolores said. I also have a concern that we're no longer under boards and commissions. We were moved to neighborhood services, which makes no sense to me at all. At one time, we had talked about being an overseeing commission to some other commissions, and now we're not even under boards and commissions. I don't know how this affects us in terms of getting an executive director, if it does at all, but I don't understand what's going on with the city at all.
Okay. Hi, this is April. My hand's up and I don't know how to get on here. So I'm just going to talk and you can shut me up. But, and I don't mean to be ignorant on this, but I am. I don't know why we don't have an executive. Is it a funding issue, or is it just they haven't found somebody? Are they not looking? And that being said, how did we get moved without being told we were moved? Like they just arbitrarily, Farhad, I'm so sorry.
No, don't.
Can you
don't
be our
worry about it.
executive director?
Well,
He has another job.
I mean, that would
I
mean
know.
the city would have no immigrant affairs manager.
Yeah.
That might be more
I mean,
important.
So I
Okay.
think that these are all good questions and valid concerns. I think based on conversations with many of you and what we just heard, that there is, overwhelming concern that we don't have an executive director, and we haven't had one for quite some time, and it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to carry out our mission. So I think, that has been represented, and I think we need to continue to represent that. And I appreciate, Vice Chair Canizales calling on each of us to engage your council member or the mayor, or whoever may have appointed you to voice your concerns. This isn't an action item, so we can't vote to do that as a body. But I would encourage everyone, if you are concerned about this, say something, do something. We are in the middle of a budget process, so there may still be time to include funding for an executive director. So I think Commissioner Purcell, if you ask, is it a funding issue? Maybe, as well as just it hasn't been prioritized. I see Commissioner, looking, Rizzo, I believe you're next.
So with regard to conducting investigations, I mean, that's one of my actual professional jobs.
Yes.
There's no way that we're going to be able to do that, in my professional, humble opinion. And I heard Commissioner Higa talk about, how would we even go about doing that? What is the process? And that unfortunate story, you just told, and I feel bad about that. And hearing, the numbers of complaints that might be stacked up in emails somewhere, and listening to Bill talk about the fact that this is in the municipal code as to duties that we have. These are all very real and very important concerns. And I don't believe that we are capable as a commission to conduct the investigations to find cause or not cause, or support or not support on allegations and complaints of discrimination. That is a huge task. Even doing one investigation like that can take weeks. by a professional person. So I'm not really clear. And that's why I wanted to ask Bill his opinion, because he works at the city attorney's office. And I've spoken with him on other occasions through the bylaws subcommittee. I'm not clear how we would even do one or a few or whatever. So I do have grave concerns about that. And that's why I wanted to be clear, is that, is that tasked appropriately to a staff person? And does that executive direct, would they be able to handle that? And apparently that's tasked to them. So I just wanted to put forth, my understanding and my experience doing that on a professional level. With regard to mediations and conciliations, that's also a professional job of mine. And I would love to be involved with that. And I'd love to have some of you, work on that. And I think that's a wonderful part of being on this commission and working with the community and engaging in a facilitated conversation with people about their issues and concerns, and allowing them to engage in conversation about how to resolve issues through their own process, and be able to communicate, collectively and help them engage in that process. And that is something I think we can do. So, talking on those two sides, I think that's a great role for commissioners, such as ourselves. Of course, we need to talk about mediation and what that means and how to do that. But that is something I do have skill at. And that's something I think we can bring in some people to train us on that as well, as we've spoken about before. That being said, this leads me to sort of my conclusion. I know this isn't an action item, but I do think it's imperative that we perhaps collectively as a commission write to our mayor, CC our council members with that letter to say, this is an item in the municipal code that is required of us, and we cannot do this job without an executive director.
I couldn't agree more. And so I would ask Farhat, can we agendize that for our next meeting? And maybe some of us offline can coordinate or draft something that we can then share with the commission in advance of that meeting.
Yeah, and just to also related to what you said, Kristen, the executive director in the past was able to take some of the issues and get them to the right person, to the right agency, handle the issue. And then when it came to some that were within our area, then they did come, she did come to us and ask for volunteers, and we were able to work on those specific. But I think you're right, with the number of concerns and concerns that are coming, and again, nothing against Farhat, has been great, the city staff has been great. It's a different issue. So, and I think Bill brought up a good point. If this is, are we creating these, this process temporarily, or is this the way it's going to be? And if so, then that's a different discussion. So I think we need to have that answer before we can really talk about what the process is going to be.
I think that's a great point. I'm looking at Commissioner Higa. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Kristen said, but I think we have to be very careful that we're waiting for a director, because I noticed Dolores said she,
Or he.
because our last director was the one that really did not follow up and follow through to me. And that's the one that dropped the ball on this. Mm-hmm. And I love, like you said, I love working with the public. This was really energizing to me. And we had a process in place where they would ask for volunteers. And this case was a discrimination concern by a public vendor. He named his lunchbox restaurant Jap in the Box. And it should have been Japanese palette in the box, but on his display and all his advertising was Jap in the Box. And the Japanese American associations came to us and said, we want to know why this is happening. It's very terrible. It brings back old wounds from World War II, where the Japanese Americans were subjected to this, just like people using the N-word. That's how it feels. So when the process was going well, I was as like a mediator consultant. I called the Jap in the Box owner. I spoke to the Japanese American organization, and the business owner refused to talk to me. So we were just
And
During the
Godwin,
consultations, right?
I'm sorry to cut you off. I am looking at the time, but I'm glad. I mean, I think you bring up a point about the important role that we play
Right.
in terms of mediation and conciliation. So I think we want to be able to continue doing that. And it sounds
Yes.
like, based on what Commissioner Rizzo shared, she has expertise, and that piece of work is something, depending on the
should do.
bandwidth of commissioners, that we could continue doing. But I do want, I think, let's agendize this again next month. Let's come together, send a letter calling for the need for an executive director to fulfill our mission per the Muni Code, and go from there. I do see Farhat. Would you like to speak? Is that related to this? No.
We can wait until it's agendized next time.
If there's a, yeah, I'm sorry. If
I'll
there
get-
are a group of people that want to volunteer to start working on this, I mean, I don't want to say, oh, we're not going to start because we don't know what's happening, but I just think that we do need to, yeah, I mean, we just need to move forward to at least know whether we're going to have a director or not.
Yeah. And Vice Chair Gonzalez, I'm wondering what you think about potentially moving forward with working on a process specific to mediation. If that feels appropriate at this point, and maybe calling for some volunteers to do that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
I have a question on that. Have we read the complaints that have come in the last year? We have. So we know the
We are
general.
we're still going through some of them, I believe. Is that right, Farhat?
So I can give a brief overview. When someone submits a discrimination complaint, they fill it out on the HRC's website. There's a web form. That then gets email notified to the HRC email address, which is just hrc@sandiego.gov. I just obtained access to that email address just a couple of weeks ago. And now that I have access, when I opened that inbox, there were 1,900 unread emails in there. So I have since gone through the process of filtering those emails, those that are discrimination complaints, that are award nominations, that are just folks who maybe didn't fill out the discrimination complaint form online, but have just sent an email of, on various topics to the HRC. And that is essentially as far as I've gotten in terms of trying to organize what's in there, so that then the next step would be going through each of those, prioritizing and responding to emails that may not be discrimination complaints, but are just requests for help or asking for information. So I'm going through that gradually. Understandably, it's going to take time. The other challenge with the discrimination complaints is that, one, they're not always complete. So when folks fill out the form, some of them just don't have the requisite information needed to be able to then figure out, okay, is this something that you all can act on? The other issue is it's a web form, and I can tell you there are some instances where potentially the same person has filled out the form 10 times on the same day. And so there are duplicates that have to be filtered out. I mean, there's just a lot of administrative tasks that go through. So all of that to say, I can't unfortunately give you a general idea.
I think that's great. And I think that should be incorporated into the letter to the mayor that we have 1,900 unread complaints potentially. Okay. I'm happy to help out wherever I can. I would, even if it's just going through and helping you read them, Farhat. So let me know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If somebody wants to volunteer, that's great.
Yeah. Is there anybody else in addition to Commissioner Purcell who would like to work on this? I see Detsky Weil.
Can I make just one note on that? Unfortunately, only city staff with sandiego.gov email addresses have access to that email account. And when the form gets submitted, not everything is included necessarily. So, I mean, I'm happy to forward emails as needed, but just bear with me if it takes just a little bit more work to get them to.
Absolutely. And I think I would say I'm looking for people who are interested in working on this issue, and I think we can have a meeting, and I don't know, Vice Chair Canizales, if you're willing to chair a committee to talk about how to work with Farhat, based on what she's just shared, to do the best we can in a bad situation.
I think, yeah, instead of taking everybody's time here, why don't we pull together Godwin, Kristen, Faye, April, myself, and we could talk about the process of the complaints going to Faye in April, and then separately, Kristen and Godwin could go ahead and maybe work on what we're going to do, what some of the complaints are. So why don't we I'll try to schedule something. Does that sound
Perfect?
okay? Thumbs up. All right, we'll get something going next week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Our next item is bylaws revision update. And before we get to the update, is there any public comment for this item?
Seeing
No.
none.
Okay. Commissioner Detsky-Weil, will you be sharing an update, or Vice Chair Canizales?
Oh, for the bylaws? I'm sorry. We met with the Deputy City Attorney, Bill Gersten, to continue discussing the things that we were thinking about putting in the bylaws, and were in the bylaws. And it turns out there's so much that's in the municipal code that they don't have to be in the bylaws. So we always have these detailed discussions, and we haven't been able to finish yet. So we're still working on it. I think Bill was going to send to Dolores, Commissioner Canizales, what he had put together. And then I don't know if Commissioner Canizales has already done that, but then we were going to look at, so that we have a point where we are each time we meet with a new version up to that point, and then we can work from that to get this finished. So we're getting there. We're almost done. And then we'll bring it to the commission.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your work on it. I know it has been a multi-month process, and we appreciate all the time you're putting into it.
I want to thank Vice Chair Canizales and Commissioner Rizzo for working on this with me, and their valued information and valued help, and Bill Gersten as well.
Yes. Before we move on to our next item, does anyone have any questions or comments about this one? Commissioner Rizzo?
Not on this one, but I note that Commissioner Higa wrote a comment in the chat, so
I see that.
I just want to acknowledge that.
I see that, and I will actually, so that is public, and I believe, or I will share it publicly, that Commissioner Higa voiced that he was cut off and believes this is a very serious process. And I want to emphasize that I too agree this is a very serious process, which is why we're forming a subcommittee to delve into it at greater length and ensure that we provide the attention that it deserves. And that my moving us along was simply to make sure we get through each of our agenda items. I do see Commissioner Brown. Were you simply voicing that you'd like to join the committee, or was that a question in the chat?
Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, I see in the chat, the words "I would," was that simply that you wanted to join the subcommittee, or that you wanted to share something?
Join the subcommittee.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. Anything else on bylaws? All right, and we will be skipping over our next item on the agenda, which is hate crimes and a violent extremism report, because Commissioner Gillies unfortunately was unable to join us tonight. She just wasn't feeling well, but she will share a report with us at our next meeting. So that takes us to the Global Affairs and Immigrant Affairs report from Farhat. And I will ask you if there's public comment And if not, please go ahead.
And seeing none, I will move forward. Thank you, Chair Hazen. So I wanted to start just by noting on the issue of border closures, the mayor did meet with Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas advocating for restrictions to be lifted regarding non-essential travel. As I'm sure you all know, that's had an immense impact on businesses, and so trying to ensure that those impacts are reduced by lifting some of those border closures. That's something that has been advocated at the highest levels. I wanted to note on the convention center, as you all know, there are migrant children, unaccompanied children being housed there. The end date for that is July 15th because, again, as you all know, there are restrictions being lifted and there are events on the books for August. The goal is to ensure that every child there is reunified with a sponsor. And as a reminder, the services that are provided at the convention center to the unaccompanied children include medical care, healthy meals and snacks, recreation, education, legal services, case management. They are able to make phone calls to their families and behavioral health. As of today, the total census of kids there are 1,032, and so far we've had 1,192 reunifications. So wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that. Also, San Diego has joined Cities for Citizenship and Welcoming America. We're also a part of Cities for Action, which presents a lot of opportunities for advocacy alongside other cities committed to immigrant inclusion and integration. And alongside Jewish American Heritage Month, we all know about AAPI Heritage Month this month in May, and June is our flagship Immigrant Heritage Month as well, and we're working on creative ways to celebrate that, as well as World Refugee Day on June 20th. So wanted to put that on your radars. The only other thing I will add is that there's always ongoing work on the Welcoming San Diego strategic plan and the recommendations included in that plan. It is very robust. It covers everything from education to economic opportunity, inclusive access, including language access and mobility, promoting safe and connected communities, civic engagement. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, but that work continues alongside the work of the HRC. And the last thing I'll say is please remember to follow Welcoming San Diego on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. So look forward to seeing you all on there and also following you back.
Thank you, Farhat. And in terms of Welcoming San Diego, is there a task force or a working group that is meeting? I know there had been one. I believe it had stopped meeting. Is that meeting again?
It is not. I believe the steering committee was specifically for developing the plan, and once the plan was developed and put together, that steering committee was dissolved. But that's not to say that communication and work with those partners who have helped put the plan together and were a part of that initiative doesn't continue. I mean, I definitely keep in touch with a lot of those organizations. I obviously have not had the chance to meet all of them, but a good number of them as of this point, and I have kind of a running tracker that I update to make sure that I'm in touch with those organizations and the folks who are a part of Welcoming San Diego. So I see that as an ongoing relationship, especially as we work to implement pieces of that plan and really identify where there may be gaps and where the city may be uniquely positioned to support.
And are there specific items in the plan that the city is prioritizing, or haven't you been able to dig in and sort of pull out priorities from the plan that you'll be implementing in the year ahead, I suppose?
Yes, I will say that work is ongoing, and again, just being mindful of what's on the public agenda, I would recommend if we include it as a more specific agenda item for the next June meeting, I'd be happy to go into detail and do a presentation on kind of successes and challenges and current priorities, because there's definitely a lot there, and I want to make sure that we have time to get into that and to hear your feedback.
That would be great. And I would love to have you do a more robust presentation and be our featured speaker on welcoming San Diego next month.
Happy to.
Thank you. Any questions for Farhat about immigrant or global affairs? Commissioner Purcell?
I'm just looking right now while you're talking, and there's a lot of welcoming San Diegos. Can you give us the handles really quickly so we could add them?
Yes, absolutely. So give me 2 seconds. So
That's okay. You can just put them in the chat.
okay. Well, I'll
So
also state them just for the record for the public. So on Twitter and Instagram, we're at SD Welcomes. And then on Facebook, the page is just Welcoming San Diego.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? All right. Our next item is following up on Sandag Communities of Concern. As I shared at our last meeting, Vice Chair Canizales and I met with Sandag staff about our formal request for the agency to stop using the term communities of concern. And that item was brought to their social equity working group back in March. And yesterday, Sandag's executive director, Hassan Ikrata, and Chair Catherine Blakespear sent us a letter describing their response to our request, which explains that rather than ban the use of the term, the social equity working group decided to, quote, use terms appropriate and respectful to the context, with the understanding that sometimes we use terms like communities of concern for reasons such as data sources or as part of a legal definition. And so just as I shared last time, they may still use the term, but the hope is that there will be context and whenever possible, other terms, more appropriate and respectful terms, will be used. So not exactly what we asked for, but close. And Farhat has the letter, and was it shared? I can't remember. It hasn't been shared, but it can be shared after the meeting. Is that right?
I don't believe it's actually, let me.
Well, Farhat's looking. I'm going to, so hopefully she can share it. It came after the meeting packet was shared and after all of the public information was shared related to this meeting. So it only came yesterday. The other thing I wanted to share is related to this issue of communities of concern. It was brought to my attention also yesterday that Mayor Gloria's press release about his May budget revision includes the term communities of concern. So we thought this was a Sandag specific issue. Turns out the city uses the term as well. The press release states that priorities being funded include, quote, creating a summer program to help children and families participate in activities at libraries and recreation centers in communities of concern. And I think there are other ways to describe those communities. And don't think that term should be used by the city either. And so what I'm planning to do, being mindful of the guidance that Bill Gersten shared, is I plan to send a letter as chair, but not on behalf of the commission, to the mayor's office, calling on the city to stop using the term, just as we did with Sandag. And Farhat, can you add just an agenda item so that we can receive an update or share an update on the city's response at our June meeting?
Yes, and I can send that email with the letter attached after this meeting.
Terrific, thank you. Any questions or comments about the communities of concern issue? Okay, our next item is the chair's report. Oh, and I just realized, Farhat, that I had forgotten to ask if there's any public comment on the last item.
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. And I did see a comment, a private comment asking if we could vote now for us to be able to send the letter to the city from the commission. We can't because this is an information item and not an action item. So good thought. That unfortunately won't work. All right, and then moving on to the chair's report. Any public comment on this one?
Seeing none.
Okay, great. There are a couple things I wanted to share with you. So the first is about the California Association of Human Relations Organizations, known as CAIRO. Since we last met, Farhat and I met with the executive director of CAIRO, along with Danelle Scarborough, who served as this commission's executive director for many years and was also on the board of CAIRO. It was a great meeting. They want us to get more involved. They want to make sure San Diego is still represented on their board to help shape programming, share resources, and ensure the needs of the people we represent are reflected in their statewide work. Farhat has agreed, I believe maybe temporarily, to attend their monthly board meetings. And if she isn't available, will request a commissioner serve as her alternate. And CAIRO said they'll also be reaching out to the executive director of the County Human Relations Commission to see if they too can participate. And I encourage them to do so, even though we would love to be involved. We know that our staffing is limited, and the county, I believe, has a full-time staff member that is the executive director of their Human Relations Commission. Anything else, Farhat, from you on CAIRO?
Nothing from me, just to say I'm happy to keep you all posted as I attend those meetings, and I believe they send meeting minutes out afterward, and I can share that with you all.
Great, thank you. One of the other items I wanted to share is about a meeting we had, Vice Chair Canizales and I, with Cindy Cipriani, who's the outreach director from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Michael Brown, the Associate Director of Field Operations for the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention. It's a mouthful. They build partnerships and trust to address violence and extremism from a public health perspective and use a prevention lens to do their work. And both of these agencies and respective representatives want to work with us to host a community program to raise awareness about hate crimes and extremism. And it's something that Vice Chair Canizales and I would like to do. And we're hoping to plan something with them, hopefully for the fall. And I'm wondering if there's anybody that would like to work on this. So it would be a public event and forum that the U.S. Attorney's Office and Department of Homeland Security would very much support and help scaffold. Anyone interested at this time? And again, we're looking many months out. Okay, I'm thinking maybe Commissioner Gillies, since this is very much in her wheelhouse. The last item I wanted to share is that Commissioner Murray Ramirez I'm sharing on their behalf, want to make sure that everybody knows the Harvey Milk Diversity Breakfast is being held this Friday at noon on the LGBT Community Center's social media platforms, and it's free. So hopefully you're able to join, encourage friends, family, colleagues to join as well. It's a great event. And with that, we will move into commissioner reports. Farhat, is there any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Okay, great. Then I will go through and call on commissioners to share updates and reports. Commissioner Brown?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Vice Chair Canizales?
Yeah, just, I know, I think I saw April's say maybe to the meeting with the Department of Justice. And we, in our discussions, we had also talked about maybe incorporating it to this year-long idea of say no to hate, and really looking at it from the perspective of health, of public health. And the model they have is really interesting. I'm not sure if we want to have them present at our next meeting, but we did schedule a tentative meeting in June. So if anybody is interested, just let me know. And maybe we could start to work towards probably just a Zoom meeting in the fall. So it hopefully wouldn't require a lot from us at this point. So if you're interested, just let me know. Thanks.
That's great. And I'm thinking, so I know that I already asked Farhad if she could present on welcoming San Diego as our featured speaker at the next meeting. But Farhad, could you note that for our July meeting, we would like to invite them both to come present?
Yes, I can do that. And can you just quickly repeat the
Yeah.
two folks that you'd like?
Yeah, so it's Cindy Cipriani and
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown. Thank you.
And just one last thing. I think that Farhad, you might have the roster, so we may need that updated once we have our new commissioners on there. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Detsky-Weil.
No report, thank you.
Commissioner Higa, I believe, has signed off. Commissioner Molig.
So I'm still in conversations with many different entities within the city around pronouns usage and pronouns in email signatures and things like that. So that's going along. I also wanted to let everyone know, and I'll send a flyer to Farhat later, that in June on the 13th, we're holding a panel, a virtual panel with experts in the field around trans athletes. June 1st, Hulu is releasing a documentary that my son and I were involved in, the back end of it, not in the camera end of it, that follows 3 trans athletes that were competing. And with all of the legislation around the country, a lot of people don't know how to even respond to why trans girls should be allowed to play girls' sports. They may know that it's the right thing to do, but they might not really have the talking points. So this documentary can help, and the follow-up panel will have one of the featured athletes from the film, the executive producer, and then an attorney who has been in the forefront of fighting this for over a decade. So those could be really good educational moments for everybody. Yeah, by the way, the documentary is called Changing the Game. So if you have Hulu and have the availability, definitely start checking that out in June.
That sounds great. Thank you. I know I'm thinking, as you're sharing that, I'm thinking, like, how do we share it more widely as a commission? And it's tough because we don't have social media that we're able to post from. But thank you, Kathy, for sharing that with us. Commissioner Purcell.
I have nothing.
Oh,
Thank you.
Commissioner Razi Jafari.
Nothing for me either tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Rizzo.
Nothing to report, but I just have a question. Are there any talks as things start to open up and vaccines start to become available on when we might all be coming together again in person? Are we thinking late summer or fall, or is there any discussion on that at all?
No discussion yet, though I am hopeful soon we can meet in person. Farhad, have you heard anything?
I asked that question yesterday and don't have any clarity, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Thomas.
Hi, I reached out to Kent Lee so I could report on AAPI month but I got no response from him, so I'll keep trying. I registered for the Beyond Stop Asian Hate forum that's happening from the Wilson Center, and I'll report on that the next time.
Thank you.
And I'm launching in the Mid-City a marketplace for entrepreneurs, residents of the Mid-City, as well as refugees and immigrants from that area who have been, impacted through COVID. And so maybe they're doing their own thing now. Met with a bunch of women who will be setting up shop at the fair at 44. And we're really excited about it. And I intend to use that @SD welcomes hashtag.
Yes. You read my mind. I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mode.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Well, I believe, sorry, I'm trying to look at multiple screens at once, including the chat. I believe that is the last item we have, and want to thank everybody for their contributions, for your participation. Our next meeting is June 16th at 5:30, and I am looking now for a motion to adjourn.
So motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Here a second. Seeing a second. All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, we are adjourned, and we will see you in June.
Great to see everybody.
Great.
Bye.
See some of you sooner.
Oh, Dolores, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.